When I was growing up, I had a wonderful pastor who would come into our grade school periodically, as I've shared with some of you before. And when he would come in and visit us, he would ask great questions, questions that would stir us up. And one day, when I was in about 5th grade or so, he came in and asked one of those stir-it-up questions. He said to us, looking around this 5th grade classroom, "So what do you think? Do you think Hitler and Stalin are in hell?" Now, those wars were less than 20 years before then, so most all of us shouted out, yes, they're in hell. And then he said, "You know, we can't be so quick to say that because we do not know for sure what was in their hearts. Their behavior was horrific. And yes, we can judge what they did. What they did was horrific and evil. But we don't know what was going on inside of them." And from then till now, that question has stayed with me very, very much. And his conclusion: we just don't know what's going on inside of anyone. If that's true of those people with such notorious crimes in their records, it's certainly true that anyone we know who acts in ways that we find offensive or frustrating or hurtful. The truth is, we never know what kind of pain people are in when they act like they do. Everybody has their own story that most of us don't know, that most of us will never know. Those among us this morning old enough to remember will know that as recently as some 50 years ago now, the church would not do funerals for people who committed suicide, because the act of suicide was considered such a horrible wrong. But now we know that while the act is horrific, there's usually a deep, deep suffering underneath that choice. A torment, a pain most of us will never know. A torment, a pain that can impede their freedom to do the right thing. And can be a great help to us to understand that there's always a story behind what we can see. In this gospel story, this gang of Jerusalem's finest citizens brings a woman caught in adultery to Jesus, and they throw her at his feet. Their arms are cocked back, and the stone is gripped tightly in those angry fists. And they're ready to stone her to death. And Jesus says this sentence to them about who alone should really be allowed to do that, and all the while tracing on the ground we don't know what as he speaks. And when he looks up, they've all walked away without condemning her. This is a story about judgment. It's a story against the human inclination to judge others. It's a story about what happens when we judge each other harshly, and how in our judgment we push people away, we condemn them, cutting them off, cutting them out of our hearts. We write them off. And sometimes we're even willing to destroy their lives. This whole story is an explication a demonstration of those other words Jesus spoke in another place when he said, judge not, lest you be judged. Jesus is clear. We have to be careful indeed, and that the default mode should be not judging anyone, ever. Oh, the action we can judge. People's lives depend on that action, on that judgment. It can save lives to judge an action as wrong. But when it comes to their hearts, there's a few things we need to remember. We need to remember we don't have enough evidence to judge a person's heart ever. We never do. There are two, maybe even more sides to every story. And often that truth is very, very complicated. And number three, and perhaps the most important, everyone's in pain. Everyone's hurting. We are so quick to anger, you and I, because we don't know the stories only those hearts could tell us. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was in the resistance in Nazi Germany under that Hitler. And he was a pacifist. And he fought mightily, nonviolently, always, to try to resist that violence, the horror of those years. In the end, he himself was captured and executed by those Nazis. And from that place, he penned these words: nothing that we despise in others is inherently absent from ourselves. We must learn to regard people less in the light of what they do or don't do, and more in the light of what they suffer. We must learn how to regard people less in the light of what they do and don't do, and more in the light of what they suffer. As one who can himself be quick to judge, and sometimes confuse people's actions with their hearts, what it does to me when I remember that is that, first of all, it helps me take things less personally. That's just the truth. It also helps me become more open to the fact that usually in people it's really not coming from a place of maliciousness, but rather from a place of a person's brokenness. Not from maliciousness in them against me or against anybody, but from a place of brokenness, a place of struggle, a place of suffering. It helps me to be less likely then to react with anger, less likely to hurl those stones of my own invective toward those I dislike or I disagree with, or those whose shame has been caught out in public and paraded in front of the world. And most important of all, without a doubt, is when I remember this, something melts in me. Something really melts in me. That harshness becomes softer. And instead of pushing them away and cutting them off and writing them off, I connect I connect with this very one who just hurt or offended me in some way. And I connect now to the fact that we're both in pain. We're both suffering. Everybody is. A man shared a story once of what happened to him just a little bit back. It was on a subway, Sunday morning subway ride, and while he was riding, this man boards the subway with several children in tow. The children were rowdy, and the man seemed not to care. The man put his head down, seemingly unaware of the noise they were making all around them and how much they were disturbing the passengers. This guy was irritated by all this, and so finally he got frustrated enough to tap the man on the shoulder, and he said, "Sir, your children are really disturbing a lot of people. I wonder if you couldn't try to control them a little bit more?" And the man lifted his eyes, seeming to come back from somewhere far away, and said softly, "Oh, you're right. I guess I should do something about it. I just came from the hospital where their mother died about an hour ago. I don't really know what to think. I guess they don't know how to handle it either." There will be people whom we will find ourselves critical of. There always are. They're in our own families. They're sitting right around us in this church this morning. They're in our neighborhoods, in our residence halls. They're anywhere, really. But perhaps the next time we find ourselves responding in anger or irritability or resentment, it would really serve us well after the example and the command of Jesus to remember that there's a good chance that that person is in great pain right now. And we don't know the story. And if we did, it would likely change everything.